This is welcome to Thai Talks. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning from whichever part of the world you're all joining for today's Thai Talks. Thanks for joining us, Vamshi. A quick intro about Thai and Thai Global. It all started way back in 1992 in the Silicon Valley, USA. By a group of successful entrepreneurs and corporate executives who founded the Indus Entrepreneurs. We call it TIE. Today, after close to 3 decades, we are present in 61 cities. Each city is a chapter for us. There are 15,000 members who are entrepreneurs, and there's an impact to about 100,000 startups, students, and community of stakeholders that TIE does every year. We have about 3,000 plus charter members who volunteer their time and efforts to make these mentoring, education, networking, and other activities happen for us in different cities. And we are present in 14 different countries worldwide. So there is an announcement that we will have by Mr. Manohar Reddy Mailuri, founder and CEO of UG Incorporation and Vice President of TIE Hyderabad. Manohar, over to you, sir, for the announcement.
Thank you, Fani. First of all, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this President's TIE Talk series. Good evening, Atul. Good evening, Satish. Privileged to have you here. And it's been a successful series happening for the last, I think, few weeks. And in fact, we are getting a lot more people than we anticipated. And the stickiness has been very high once you all start talking about your journey and sharing your experiences. So we ended up actually listening to the entire sessions. I mean, we didn't miss anything. So thank you so much, first of all, to take time and experiences. I'm very sure it will be of immense benefit to most of the charter members and associate members. The announcement I have for all the attendees is that TIE Global and TIE Hyderabad is hosting the TIE Global Summit in December, on December 8th, 9th, and 10th. Okay? So we are trying to make this event the biggest event for the entrepreneurs globally. We're expecting about 20,000 attendees. We are trying to have 250 plus curated startup pitches, and we're inviting 200 plus investors. We have already formed committees. We have got more than 100 people working pretty much full time. They're all from different teams, and we are trying to work with all the global chapters to engage associate members across the world. And the response has been great. So I invite and request all of you to block these dates and look for the TIE Global Summit announcement going forward. So, so you can see some of the slides. Once you can go to the next one. Yeah, so so we are definitely trying to make this the biggest event till date in the TGS. I'm very sure we all compete within us to break the past record every time, and we expect to see that this year too. Okay, so next, Vamshi. Yeah, thank you so much. That's all I had to share, and appreciate Pani for the time. And with that, I will hand it over back to Pani and of course our own good friend Vivek Verma. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Manohar Reddy. So that was the preview and a detail on the TIE Global Summit, which is arguably going to be the largest summit for entrepreneurs, going to happen in early December. Do join and also let your other people in your networks know. Like Mr. Manohar said, and today's event that all of you know, we have interesting topic and two presidents from chapters in Mumbai and Andhra Pradesh. But before we go there and introduce Mr. Vivek, quickly for the guidelines for participants. So all the attendees in this meeting are going to be on a mute mode, but nevertheless, and however you have a question for any of the speakers, please type it in the chat window. Moderator will pick from there and ask the panelists. In case if you have any trouble with your audios or settings, please seek the help from the host or probably check your internet connection once again or relog in. Vamshi. So quickly about TiE Hyderabad, without further ado, we'll go into the talk. Yes. So TiE Hyderabad is established close to 20 years back. When we said TiE Global has 61 chapters, TiE Hyderabad is one such chapter, and we have about 153 charter members who impact close to 1,200 startups on a yearly basis and about 6,000 plus students. We access about 1,200 mentor awards from our charter members, and we have other members, students, women. These are also the members who are first-time entrepreneurs. TiE Hyderabad also has a record of bringing Global Hall of Fame awards. Thanks for joining. Today, I have my partner and collaboration from TiE Mumbai, Naveen Raju, the Executive Director, is here. And my colleague from TiE Andhra Pradesh, Anudeep Chapa, is also here. And moving on, we'll jump right into the topic. To introduce the speakers, I'd like to invite Mr. Vivek Verma, our moderator for the day. He runs and founded Enterprise Solutions, Upsurge Enterprise Solutions. That's the hat he wears, but he also has many other hats, so to say. He consults with the Telangana State Innovation Cell as a senior advisor. He's a senior advisor at Telangana State Innovation Cell under Government of Telangana. He's also a co-founder of a couple of seed funds. He's been on Hyderabad Angels previously, and he's also curator and a licensee of TEDx Hyderabad. Besides coaching and investing, he also focuses on social causes through his co-founded Society for Advancement of Human Endeavor. Mr. Vivek Verma, take it away from here. All yours, sir. Please introduce our speakers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Funny. And thank you, Manohar, also for telling us a little about the upcoming TGS. With that, welcome to all of you. And I look forward to a very, very encouraging and enlightening conversation that we are going to have with two of the finest gentlemen, presidents of these two chapters. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first one of the two today, which is Mr. Atul Nishar, who is the president of TiE Mumbai. But besides just being the president of TiE Mumbai, which is one of the hats he wears, he is the founder and chairman of Ascent Overseas Education, and he was the founder and continues to be the executive chairman for Hexaware Technologies. And we will talk a little more about both of these. But he has been someone who, you know, in the latest avatar is looking at EdTech, but has done some extensive work through his, stints both with Apptech, which is a brand you may have heard of, and then of course Hexaware, which is currently roughly at the market cap of about $2 billion US. So he's someone who's contributed phenomenally in terms of innovation, in terms of technology, and also in terms of a lot of the industry associations. And he's displayed leadership not just within the organizations he founded, but I think at an industry level. So thank you very much, Atul, for joining us today, and I look forward to a real deep, insightful conversation with you. So let us all welcome Mr. Atul Nishar.
Thank you, Vivek. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And with that, we move on to the other fine, wonderful gentleman we have today, Mr. Satish Andhra, who is the president for the TiE Andhra Pradesh chapter, which was originally known as TiE Amravati, and they rechristened themselves as TiE Andhra Pradesh a little while ago. And again, he comes with a very strong pedigree. He's also the managing director for India Partners, which is a very large fund. Vamsi, we can move to the next slide. And Satish himself has been someone who's, strong technology background, and we will talk a little more about as we go forward, from a very strong engineering background, and then he grew and rose through the ranks from being an engineer to being a product person, and then eventually become an investor. And as you can see from the slide in front of you, he's played some fantastic roles before India Partners, even with really marquee names like Venture East, DFJ, and he's been an entrepreneur himself. He's had a few successful exits and now runs funding where he helps others to exit. So I'd like to welcome Satish. Thank you very much for joining us today, Satish. And I also look forward to a lot of insights from you today. So thank you.
Thank you, Vivek. Yeah, thanks, Atul. Good to be on this virtual dais with you.
Pleasure, my pleasure.
With that, I think let's get into talking a little about the whole art and science of building world-class B2B business and raising capital, which is what the topic for today is. And like I said, I'm looking forward to having some good insights from both these gentlemen. So let's start with Atul. If I was to ask you, at the beginning, one of the questions that at least I had, and maybe many others in the organization might have, is what's a chartered accountant who had no engineering background? You're not even someone who had academically done engineering, went on to become a founder of a $2 billion software development organization. So what's going on here? What took you from a chartered accountancy to a software company founder?
So, okay, first of all, thanks a lot for your very kind introduction, and also appreciate TiE Hyderabad for inviting me on this platform, this wonderful platform. It's indeed a pleasure. Now, insights, I don't know much whether I'll be able to, but we'll try to have some fun over next hour or so, and have a nice chat that let's have. I started practicing as a chartered accountant and practiced for about 18 months or so. During this period, what I found is the clients I advised were, it was not easy to make them execute that. So they listen, something is done, not done. So really, it didn't give me that much pleasure that I was able to make a difference. And I thought that, if I go on advising people, they may listen, not listen, because it's not in my hands. It's up to them. So I'm not creating something really. I mean, it's not really giving me satisfaction. And if I really know my job, I should be able to do it myself. Why am I going on advising others? So I guess my DNA was not meant for advisory services. It was more for being an entrepreneur. So that's when I thought I need to do something on my own. And that was the time I looked at different projects in IT. And there were a lot of IT because computer was so much talked of in India. There was so much talk in early 80s about computers that I thought, let me look at that. And some were import-based, like hardware and peripheral, all import-based, and that didn't excite me. And software, early 85, I didn't understand anything. So I started Aptech, the computer education company. We'll come to that a little later, but then I ran it for 4.5 years. We were among the one of the top 2 computer education companies by then. And one consulting company approached me that they were doing a report on Indian software industry. And would I like to join that and fund it partly and get a report? I did that. the report came that the Indian software industry is very small, less than $100 million in export. Already the two Tata companies are dominating it, and there's not much potential for newcomers. So when I read it, the more I read, the more I got convinced that this is the industry for me. The reason being that I was not a big business house or running a large corporate. And while I was successful in computer education, it was still not a huge company with huge resources. And I thought a small industry is a good entry point. And the only well-known companies in this business are Tata's. And there seems to be potential. And that's when I incorporated Hexaware Technologies. I had no background in computers. You're very right. No engineering. My own knowledge of computers is very limited, even today, in terms of usage myself. But then there was excitement of setting up a, not just software company, software export company. We were very clear, we are not going to do domestic work. So even today, Hexaware domestic work is less than 1%. And 99% is outside India. So we were very clear. We set up an office in US. And what a great excitement. You know, we go to America and then do projects for large American companies. So there was a passion behind it, something that we were proud of as Indians. And being not a computer person, I can say I well overcame that, hired the best of technology people, and they felt more respect from me than what they got from other places by the engineers. And they knew I'm very humble. I was very clear, I don't know enough of computers, and you guys are going to provide solutions, not me. And the respect that they enjoyed from me and in the organization, and the trust that they could put in me, made all the difference. So they all stayed with me 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, as long as I wanted. So, so the technical side was well taken care of. And the business side, I would say B2B business, the most important, number one thing is relationship building. Because you're dealing with limited number of clients, corporates. It is a relationship you build that makes all the difference. And here what I mean by relationship is not just having lunch and dinner and building that fellowship. What I mean is delivering to them on time, making sure that the people who trusted us are proved right, and we don't let them down. And that is what built a strong, strong relationship with all of them. So that was one. Second was flexibility. It was very important to be flexible with clients, willingness to accommodate, willingness to structure a transaction or a deal as per their needs. And I think let me give you just one example. Like PeopleSoft, when they wanted to build up BOT, build, operate, transfer unit, while we had some internal skills, we were one of the contenders for that. But we found that no very large scale players from India were in the race. They believed that build, operate, transfer means when that transfer happens, the revenue will drop. So why should we build for somebody else? That was the idea. Whereas we thought, if PeopleSoft is our client, such a mega ERP company, what an immense reputation it will build for us globally. And apart from earning revenue for whatever that period, we will also be able to acquire so many clients. And by the time, Oracle acquired and exercised the T option of transfer, we had acquired 40 to 50 blue chip companies globally on PeopleSoft, and then we could offer other services and became a company that everyone took notice of globally. So the flexibility helped us in building Hexaware at every single stage. And as I said, trust of employees, we maintain, continue to maintain, and that is what kept the team together, and willingness to share with them. Like we kept growing, we kept improving revenue, profit, but we had multiple stock option plans in a way that there was upside shared with the team, and they could take it as, consider it as their own company, that they are also gaining along with the founder. So when I sold my stake ultimately, it was not a jealousy that Atul Nishar and family getting so much money, but there was happiness that they were all making money, that we were all together in that. And the relationship continued even after that. So I think some of these messages I would like to share with the participants here, that this is what would help in succeeding in a entrepreneurship.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Atul. Wonderful insights. And also, we can see the humbleness that we hear from a man who's built 2 billion market cap organization, and how your journey has been from a chartered accountant to wealth creator for so many more people. And it's wonderful because as we were listening to you, I already hear one of your ex-employees putting a message on the chat window that maybe you created Hexaware for people like him, and he's still doing that even 15 years later. So that's what legacies are built for. So thank you, Atul, for that wonderful insight. And with that, moving to you, Satish, for you, it's kind of a slightly reverse journey. You started off as an engineer, a hardcore techie, working in the technical areas. And then from there, you've kind of graduated and moved all the way to products, sales, product marketing, being a co-founder, being a founder, holding leadership positions, and then eventually in the space of investing today. And you run a very large, very successful fund where you're investing in tech startups. So you've had a journey in a certain sense reverse to what Atul is doing. He went from a chartered accountant to being a founder of a tech global giant, and you went from a technical background to being a successful owner of a large fund. So talk to us a little about what kind of led you to take this path.
So thank you, Vivek. Of course, thanks to TiE Hyderabad, and hello, Atul, and good evening to all the folks out there. So whether it's someone with a chartered accounting background or an engineering background, I firmly believe, Vivek, I think we all walk the path. I don't think we choose the path, right? So my journey is roughly 3 decades. The first 10 years was more an engineer. The second 10 years, an entrepreneur, and the last 10 years, an investor. I graduated from JNTU, Anantapur, then got my master's in computer engineering in Illinois, and then moved to Bay Area. So the first 10 years was all in San Francisco Bay Area. Actually, 20 years roughly was in Bay Area. I worked as an engineer and then an engineering manager. But what piqued my curiosity was obviously customers have requirements and customers have problems that products and solutions try to solve, like what Atul also highlighted. And then you have a product or solution that you offer to customers. And then there's competition, which is trying to, of course, offer a similar or a better or a bit inferior solution. So at the confluence of what customer cares about, what you offer, and what your competitors offer is, you realize, that's the holy grail. So that kind of awareness made me move from engineering into product marketing. Like many people in Valley do, the entrepreneurial bug bit me. And Ty also, I would say had a very pivotal role. I've been fairly active participant in Ty from, late 90s. So joined a startup called T-Square, and we were acquired. Post T-Square, started a software company called Euclid, building IT dashboards, raised, 35 odd million venture capital, did a lot of good things, but also committed mistakes as an entrepreneur. When we exited Euclid, I wanted to learn, venture capital, wanted to move to the other side of the table. Was fortunate to get an opportunity with DFJ. I was with them for 5 years, learning, investing the whole life cycle. How do you source and screen and select the right kind of startups? How do you help them grow? And then eventually, how do you exit? So that was very, very important learning. And then kind of bumped into Dr. Ramesh, my partner now at India Partners. Again, I think Ty is what brought us together. So this was Ty ISB Connect. I think Dr. Ramesh was president of Ty Hyderabad. I used to come from Bay Area, used to put the content together for Ty ISB Connect. I really liked Dr. Ramesh, and I knew that there's going to be huge disruption in healthcare. And that's how we got started on India Partners journey. Now we have $100 million under management. We're investing from our new fund. We focus on product startups that are globally relevant. We believe that India did really well, like Atul mentioned, in IT services, BPO services, even pharma services. I think that was all kind of first wave of entrepreneurship. Indian entrepreneurs also did really well building internet and mobile app companies. We know that there are lots of unicorns out there, and we are one of the most vibrant and largest startup ecosystems. And we strongly believe that now there's enough talent. I think returning Indians and Indians, who have worked for R&Ds of MNCs, and also some of the fresh graduates were very fearless. And, because the information industry is now completely democratized and there are no intermediaries, I think there's a great talent pool in the country, and they can build the products not just for India, but also for the globe. And, that's what we love, and that's our purpose. We invest and work alongside to help these entrepreneurs build great companies.
Fantastic. Again, wonderful journey, Satish, and thank you for taking us through that 30 years in the 10-10-10 breakup, and wonderful that you're doing to help India kind of move to a different level on the product side. Like you rightly said, a lot of times people look at India more from a services standpoint only, and I think a lot of work you're doing will help us kind of transition that. With that, Atul, coming back to you, when you started AppTech and you started focusing on computer education, and this was really early days when computer education was not so famous, and you kind of dived into that AppTech and you took it up to 1,000 centers, focusing on B2C business, dealing with students, going out and acquiring business at a student level, which is not an easy thing to do. So for someone to do that, it would have been a difficult choice that you made. So talk to us about some lessons that you got in the B2C business, taking that to 1,000 centers across the country and making it one of the top 2 brands, as you rightly mentioned a while ago.
Yeah. So as I had said sometime back, that after my CA, I was looking at getting into an entrepreneurial venture, and I looked at computer being a sunrise industry. Now at that time, when I focused on computer education, a lot of relatives, known people were telling me that, look, you should set up a manufacturing unit. It would be bigger. Computer education is a small thing, it's like mom and pop shop. So why do you want to get into that? Do something bigger. So I had visited different places, even looked at manufacturing units and explored that. But I didn't enjoy the manufacturing field, and somehow that didn't excite me. So computer education, then I thought that while we are starting, we'll make a difference in it. We'll do something different, something bigger here. So we did not look at as a small unit or a small company or business. We did in a very organized manner. We created a corporate entity and we created manuals for academic, for marketing, for administration. So there was set guideline for every center, what to do, how, when. And then when we set up multiple centers, it was so much easier. And we also went for a franchise operation. And then we decided we should go abroad. Why only India? And we started setting up centers abroad. Now, one thing we decided, when we go outside India, we started getting offers for tie-up, technical tie-up or some kind of alliance. We said no. Every center of AppTech, whether we own or a franchise, will run under the brand of AppTech. No other brand, no tie-up, just AppTech. No matter which country, it has to be AppTech center, follow same guidelines as they are in a center in India. And we started adding country after country after country. And we, at the peak, in year 2000, which was the peak, we were in 50 countries with 1,500 plus centers. And all under AppTech brand. And we were training 3 lakh to 4 lakh students a year in career education, which was more than any university in the world. Now this process, as I said, one important thing was working as a corporate, working in an organized manner, and we could consolidate the industry. So it is not, the point is not whether the industry is looking small or large. What is more important is there a pain area? Now there was a pain because the computer education quality was not good enough. Of course, there was a well-organized company called NIIT, but they had some, I remember that time, some 4 or 5 centers when we started. And by and large, this sector was in small centers, small ownerships. So that is when we were able to address the major requirement of building talent for India and building manpower. And then that, of course, happened even elsewhere in the world. And that's where I believe that Indian flag only went to other countries as a result. So the potential is important as we can one can visualize, and are you addressing a pain area? Is there a white space that is unfulfilled? And I thought it was greatly unfulfilled. Colleges didn't have proper infrastructure. We had the infrastructure, and we were able to give the kind of hands-on experience that colleges and schools were not able to. Now, running AppTech was a lot of fun because B2C business is about brand. Just as I said, B2B is about relationships with individual clients. Here it was about building brand. People must look at the brand and have trust coming in their mind. Is this the name I can relate with? Is what students have to say. So we could succeed in creating that brand. Of course, brand building is a separate topic, but I would say that we were able to succeed in building that. And that brand building is not just by advertising, which is one of the things, but also what media tells about you, what newspapers, magazines, what they had to tell about you, and what opinions they were building about you. So we could build a very solid brand, and hundreds of students coming into every center every day, going out, coming in, going out, all youngsters. There was like a festive environment in that. So B2C business can attract competition faster, because then people are able to understand. A lot of entrepreneurs get fascinated by B2C business. They get attracted by that. And they set that up. So competition can always be more. And unless you are in the top few, top 3, 4 type, I would say preferably in the top 2 or 3, really one will not go too far. Then it won't be like building a big business. You won't be building a big value out of it if you're one of many. So that is one important thing I would like to point out here.
Fantastic. Again, here's someone who has built 1,500 centers in 50 countries. So for those of you who are looking at a B2C business, I think those were some very, very key insights. And I must tell you, Atul, that what you described today in terms of the excitement for people who could look at computer education, I'm someone who experienced it myself. 31 years ago, I walked into an AppTech center and I did my computer training there for exactly the same reasons that you talked about, that fantastic infrastructure. And I'm a product of learning my computers thanks to the initiative you took. And I'm sure many, many more, like you said, 3 lakh, 4 lakh students that you trained every year. So I'm in those few million students you would have trained.
No, Vivek, that's so wonderful to know. And it was so wonderful. Sometime back, you talked about Jaggi, who has posted a message here on this chat, who's in US, one of our early employees. And it's so wonderful. I remember once in New Jersey, I was sitting in a Walmart coffee shop when my wife was doing her shopping. And one by one, I come across 2 people who come talk to me. One saying I was a faculty at AppTech. Another one coming saying I was a student at AppTech and I did your 3-year program and now I'm in US and got a very good job. I mean, one feels so good about it. That satisfaction one gets, that I have helped, contributed to, so many people building their career either through AppTech or through Hexaware. It does give a lot of satisfaction and happiness.
It is, and especially because you're in a consumer-facing business. One of the advantages of a B2C business. And moving to you, Satish. While you were not in a consumer-facing kind of an background, at least in your early days, and you described a little early the 10-10-10 formula, where you were in the Bay Area and you started off as an engineer and then went on to becoming an engineering manager and then into product and then eventually after being an entrepreneur into an investor. So talk to us a little about that journey that you took, which was slightly different than what Atul described here, because he was someone, or his organization was someone who was more in the face, people saw it, whereas you were doing some wonderful work which many people may not have seen, but you were again taking a journey of making a difference to the world through your engineering tasks and the products that you were building. And a lot of us are kind of quite confused at times as entrepreneurs that, is that the right path to take? So talk to us a little about your path: engineering manager, product, entrepreneur, and then an investor.
Yeah, so Vivek, I think a lot of times, there are great books about this. Lots of psychologists have run myriad of experiments. I think go with your gut. And that's what I've done, I think, all through my career and all through my life. You wouldn't believe I used to play and I was state champion a couple of times in the United. Before I went to engineering, I just wanted to take up a job in railways or LIC, and both of them offered me because I was playing table tennis really well and just wanted to play the sport. In fact, the reason why I did engineering or I went to MPC
think Satish having internet problem.
Yeah, hi, Vivek, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, now we
yes.
can hear you. I think we lost you in the middle, but you were talking about the wanting to get into, railways. That's when.
Yeah, no, I think I had offers from both railways and LIC and, banks because they recruit sports people, right? So I, in 12th grade, my interest was to just play sport. But in fact, the reason why I did math, physics, chemistry was you would have less number of lab visits if you didn't take a BPC. That was my reason to choose math, physics, chemistry, right? But once I moved to engineering, I stopped playing and just entirely focused on engineering. And I had a choice to make between an IIM Bangalore versus going to US for my master's. I made the choice to go and pursue higher education, in technology. Even when I started designing semiconductors for a company called VLSI Technology, it is a $1 billion semiconductor company. Customers were Apple, IBM, and Motorola. And they were competing against, of course, Intel's of the world, right? Apple was competing. And the passion with which we built, I have few patents as an engineer. It was really about enabling our customer, right? Making sure that our customer wins, the battle.
We seem to have.
I'm not sure what's going on. I think Zoom is bailing out on me.
I think maybe some internet issues. But yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, you guys lost me.
You were talking about VLSI and the design work.
Vivek, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So where did you lose me?
The VLSI, you were talking about your move to VLSI and.
Yeah, so I said, when we started designing chips, it was mainly for Apple, IBM, Motorola, and they were competing against Intel. It's really about enabling, your customer to win the battle. And post that, I moved to a company called LSI Logic. And LSI, obviously, we were designing, communication chips. And the communication chips were mainly for companies like Cisco's and Junipers of the world. And pretty much, again, if you really look at startups work at the cutting edge of the technology, and you need to enable them. As a company that provides products, you need to keep your customer requirements as a big priority, and you need to meet their time to market cycles, cost performance cycles. And all along, I used to obviously listen to a lot of startups. I think while I was there at Netscape, I was co-founded by Mark Andreessen. Right when I was working at LSI, we used to follow Netscape very, very actively in terms of what they were trying to do with the browser. So that's when it piqued my curiosity to go work for startups, and that's how T-Square happened. And T-Square was more a network processor. If you look at Intel, was dominating in terms of desktops and laptops, but communication boxes required a network processor. So obviously, to run all the protocols, communication-specific protocols, you needed a processor that was protocol aware, and that's what T-Square did. And interestingly, the entire T-Square engineering was done in France. Only the front-end team was in Silicon Valley, the CEO, the CFO, CTO, myself, and a couple of other executives. And, we got acquired. And though I was designing semiconductors, I've always, spent more time in the software industry. I used to read a lot about internet. And that's how kind of Euclid happened. What Euclid did is for large IT corporations, it enabled CIOs to manage IT, because every IT department would have huge applications portfolio, offshore development companies, infrastructure management companies, help desk providers, and desktop service providers. So to be able to manage all of this complex environment, they required insights and they required workflows and they required reports and dashboards, and that's what we built. And in terms of, like I said, you have to just follow your gut, because many a times, we do lots of planning, but you need to be very aware, right? The future will never provide the reassurance that you seek from it. You have to kind of go with the flow and listen to your heart. And after they exit Euclid, I thought how wonderful would it be. I had done a lot of good things, but I also had committed a lot of mistakes as an entrepreneur. It'd be fun to go work with entrepreneurs. And, early stage is what really enthused me, because when an entrepreneur starts their journey, building your product, how do you choose the right feature sets? What is an MVP? These are all fairly abused words, right, in the industry. Yes. An MVP, a lean methodology, business model canvas, blue ocean, all of these things, I think are talked about a lot. But when it comes to implementing these in practicality and how do you derive benefit out of those, not many people have done that, right? While academia talks about the theoretical model, the practitioners sometimes may not get the full gist of it. So early stage is what I really liked, helping entrepreneurs launch product, get their first 10, 20 customers, hire people in the team where they have gaps, and then scrub the business plan and be ready for growth. And so that's what I realized I would enjoy, and that's how India Partners journey started. Very glad that for every dollar that we put in our portfolio companies, they've raised $35 from external investors. Wow. So that kind of validates that we do it reasonably well in terms of growing helping these entrepreneurs build their companies.
Wow, 1 to 35 is a fantastic ratio, and obviously you've done a lot of things right to get to that level. Thank you, Satish, for sharing that. And coming to you, Atul, so all that lovely journey you described at Apptech, getting to 1,500 centers, 50 countries, changing the lives of many individuals like me, you then decided to move to what many would have considered a more difficult line of business, which is a B2B business, setting up Hexaware. And what made you do this shift and get into a little bit of a less, public view or a public opinion of people, because everyone gets carried away by the glamour of a B2C brand, and you made a shift. So what made you do that, and what did you see as challenges when you shifted?
So actually for many years I ran both together, Apptech as well as Hexaware. Just to give you context, I set up Apptech in '85 and Hexaware was set up in 1990. Just 5 years later, but during 90s, it was, I was paying more attention on Apptech than on Hexaware. But to just see the difference between a B2C and B2B business, just to give you an example, in Apptech, it's a household brand. Everyone knows. Friend went to Andaman Nicobar, comes back and says, we saw Apptech center at Port Blair. Now, there is no place in India one could not see an Apptech center. It was like omnipresent. Now, it becomes a household name. Everyone knows you, founder of Apptech. Now, compared to that, Hexaware became a much larger company, but public will not know as much because that branding is not there among the public. So I remember 2003, I had sold my stake in Apptech, and there was one meeting in Mumbai when some of the entrepreneurs had got together, more from IT industry, but also non-IT. And I was being introduced there that here is Atul who founded Apptech. Now I'm just looking at the person introducing me. Aptech I've sold 4 years back. Today I'm running a many times larger company. Between 2002 and 2007, Hexaware had grown 5 times from 50 million to 250 million. And we were a darling of the stock exchange. Investors were loving us. Stock price was going up. We are employing thousands of people. And my introduction is more about having set up Aptech than Hexaware. So that is what really happens in public mind. You know, you are better known if you're running a B2C brand than a B2B brand. You know, so coming to the point of transitioning, you know, in terms of culture and come of adjusting to B2B business. Firstly, why? I did want to move into a business, add a business which is less of day-to-day administration. Now, Aptech means when you have such huge number of people entering your center every day, going out, it is a lot of administration. It's not easy to deal with such large number of people as customers on a daily basis. It's not a product you sold and they're gone. Here, every day your customer is coming in and using the product every day. So it was also tiring. And then once I set up Hexaware, I felt it was more peaceful, more quiet. One can build the business. You know, one client is happy with you, and since we dealt only in America and Europe, and then your millions of dollars contract you can get. And you're focusing on that. So it's a more peaceful type of work comparatively. But when I set up Hexaware, the challenge you see, I was already running Aptech and I wanted to appoint a CEO for Hexaware. When I just incorporated the company and I offered to someone well-known in the industry, and he accepted my offer and said, okay, it will be great pleasure working together and building this business. But when it came to joining time, just before that, he started getting cold feet. He said, look, Atul, my advice is you need to have an anchor client. You don't have a single client. You have no anchor client, then you have joint venture you should have. Like say, Tata's have a JV with Burroughs, which later on became Unisys. And digital Hinditron partnership was there. So this kind of partnership build business better. So you also have to build a partnership so that we can get captive business. And then on that we'll build. But we need something to begin with. Now I had nothing. There was not a single client. Not only that, I didn't know anyone in the global companies. There was zero connect. No connect with anyone, no assurance of any business. So, well, he didn't join this particular CEO. We still went ahead. I had difficulty getting the right CEO for quite a few years because they were well set and they didn't want to risk joining a startup. These are the problems startups would have, you know. Till you establish, attracting people in the initial phase is a challenge. There is no doubt. Today, at least the startups have gained more acceptance. But even then, challenge is big, you know. So then, without any connect, without contact, we set up a US office and we knocked the door, but we paid a lot of attention on solution building and then offering those solutions to clients. So I would say, while it is a transitioning is difficult, it is different way of doing business, but B2B, if it succeeds, is more sticky and can give you a lot more return, lot more reward for doing it. And it can sustain way longer.
Fantastic. Thank you for that insight. Again, a lot of us as entrepreneurs have this question, B2B, B2C, and I'm sure some of the insights you gave us about both the businesses should help people understand that. And that brings me, Satish, to a lot of other people who may have the same question that, here you were in some fantastic roles in the corporate world, and like you described, dealing with the Apples of the world, providing at the back end the solutions to them. And you decided from there, and you briefly talked about Euclid, getting into the communication protocol and starting something to make that transition from a very successful corporate senior ranking engineering manager to becoming a entrepreneur on your own. So talk to us a little about it. And, do you ever wonder, was it the right thing you did, or should you have stayed on? Because that's a question a lot of entrepreneurs who, before they take the jump, have. So tell us a little about what went through your mind when you did that jump.
No, I think, like I said, only when you are convinced, right? You put in your 100% and then you commit. So I don't think, even if I were to kind of rewind my journey, I might do things differently in each of those roles, but I don't know if I would do different things, right? So, what happens is when you are an engineer, you're just passionate about building products, right? You love when your product works at the specifications, performance, price point, works first time. And if it ships in volume, it's even better, whether it's software or, if you can get, if it's a B2B business, if you scale and get millions of users. If it's B2B, if you have hundreds of enterprises and thousands of enterprise, employees or whoever, or the intended users of your software. So I think you're very delighted. But what you're then missing is you're listening about, your customers' feedback through your sales and marketing teams, right? And many a times, engineers talk about, I remember the conversations we would have when marketing or sales comes to us. You have got resources, features first, right? So features, resources, time, cost. So this would be the 4 metrics we would put out there and say, you choose 2 and you leave the 2 to engineering, right? If you want certain features and, if you want certain cost, and then I'll tell you the resources and the timelines, right? Or if you want cost and time, then I'll tell you the features and resources, right? So that's how you operate, but you're kind of walking behind the elephant because you're listening to your sales and marketing. So for me, I wanted to be in those customer meetings. I wanted to hear from customers firsthand. Again, selling a consumer product, selling an FMCG product is way, way different from selling a technology product. That too, when you're talking about, deep tech, right? So that's when I started going out with sales folks and marketing folks. And I kind of realized, I think throughout my journey, I think I'm really indebted to my mentors, right? And all these mentors were my bosses. And, I think it's nature's graceful way of introducing me to these people. And they were the ones, who gave me these opportunities. I remember when I joined, LSI Logic, I think 2 weeks later, I was presenting to the CEO, a very, very well-known gentleman called Wilf Corrigan, a Brit, even VLSI former CEO was a Brit, Al Stein. So I was presenting to Wilf, and my boss was a gentleman called John Dana. And John went on to become CEO of Altera, which he sold to Intel, recently for multi-billion dollars. And John wanted me to present, and I told John that, hey, John, I'm really worried. I'm here only 2 weeks, and you want me to present to the CEO of the company. I know, he said, look, 2 things could happen. One, you may not have a job, or you may have a better job. So I'll leave it to you to choose what you want to do and come back and present, right? So I went and presented, and I kind of gave an overview in terms of where we should be going as a particular communication product company. The CEO sat there and just listened very peacefully. And then, he gave a few inputs. And later, I think they gave me the responsibility to go build that product line. So my curiosity to go listen to customers, to understand competition, I think is what kind of really got me to the front line. And then my boss, obviously gave me that opportunity to say that, okay, go experience it and let's see, what you come out with. And when I completed and the product that we built even at LSI, was $100 million in revenue. Quickly in less than 2 or 3 years. And, those days LSI did single chip Sony PlayStation, single chip digital camera, single chip, mobile phone, semiconductors, all these were highly integrated, semiconductors. Then I realized that, hey, absolutely, Intel has played, a big game. They are the dominant. Intel Inside is something everybody knew that was in the dictionary. And we knew that, communication systems were evolving, right? This whole internet, local area networks, wide area networks, internet connectivity. Those days it was 56 kbps and ISDN. And eventually, we looked at ADSL and then, kind of IP over SONET, either 25 megabits or 155 megabits, all of that plumbing infrastructure, network infrastructure was getting built. And Cisco itself was a fairly small software company that wanted to grow really fast and really big. And so we realized that there's an opportunity for a semiconductor company to go build communication processors. And so that's kind of where I found T-Square and I went and joined them. And post T-Square exit, I was reading a lot about internet, reading a lot about software companies. And I knew that there was a cobbler's child syndrome in IT, right? IT stitches the shoes for the entire family, right? The cobbler stitches the shoes for the world out there, but they don't stitch for the family. The same thing, IT builds great applications, ERP, CRM, websites, all of those business intelligence applications, but they use spreadsheets to manage large IT budgets. The CIOs of large companies, their budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars. And, but they do not have any tool sets to manage. And so that's where we conceived, a dashboard for CIO to be able to justify presence of IT within an enterprise and work with lines of business to do IT business alignment. And in that journey, I mean, when I raised my first $5 million, I still remember I was pitching from one room. Our first check was a $5 million check. The seed round raise was $5 million. And those people believed in us. And, we went on to raise, like I said, $35+ million. And in there, I had to play several roles. Initially was more of building the product and helping the engineering team build the product. I had a good founding team. One of our founders had just taken a company public on NASDAQ. He left that company to be the CTO of Euclid, founder CTO of Euclid. And we built the product and then I started going out and selling. And I wanted to, not just do marketing and work with analysts like Gartners and Forresters of the world, but really go and sell. And I would be on Priceline and Expedia, buy those inexpensive tickets, travel to Midwest or, East Coast. And we had customers like Staples and Wells Fargo and Bell South and CUNA Mutual, all fairly large American corporations. So that was kind of my journey. And that kind of taught me a whole lot. But in each of this journey, I think I had to go with my gut. I had to, commit 100%. And there's always a mentor, obviously. And, many a times, right, the advice you don't want to hear is the advice you really need. So you need to pay attention to that. And that's kind of my learning and my journey.
Fantastic, Satish. A lot of good insights there. And, I think it'll help a lot of us who want to make some of these transitions. Coming to you, Atul, and I must say, you heard from an ex-colleague earlier, and now I see you hear from one of your clients here, and Raghu Pulapalli is talking about some great service that you provided, and he still continues to remember that and value that a lot. So that brings me to another facet, which is a very interesting facet, and you touched about it briefly earlier, which is all about people, and the role people play in building organizations. So I have a question for you, so if you were to choose between strategy, which drives people, or people who drive strategy, what do you feel has been your experience?
I would say, without any doubt, 100%, the people. You build a good team, sit with them, Obviously, as a founder, you have some idea about strategies, you have some vision, discuss with them, but it's actually jointly with the team that will finalize the strategies. And what is strategy? Strategy is not permanent. It's not that I have a strategy and that continues for next 20 years. Strategy will keep getting refined, keep changing also. So it's the team that will really make it happen. You keep having such sessions. We have spent multiple occasions, hours and days discussing what to do, how to go about, how to build business. So I would say people. It's the team that makes a business happen, not the other way around.
Fantastic. And I think, you have exhibited that, with what we hear on the chat window going on, and with many of these successful ventures that you've built. And when we talk about people, Satish, I'd like to come to you and talk to us a little about this people facet of one of your trips. And you briefly touched upon it earlier with the TiE ISB Connect, and you came here and you met a cardiologist who not just took your heart away, but actually took a lot more than your heart and helped you or made you change your career. So talk to us a little about this meeting with the cardiologist which changed the life for you.
No, I don't think, maybe you misunderstood what I said. No, he didn't change my career. No, I was already making investments. I was in venture capital.
No, I meant starting something.
Dr. Ramesh changed his career. So I have I would say, bad reputation of moving him out of cardiology to make him a venture capitalist. But, I think I've written a blog about this, right? The 4 Ps for startup success. Purpose is the most important thing. Purpose is very noble, and purpose is why people come together, right? I mean, if you go back to Simon Sinek, I know, you're very active in TED, start with why, right? So why is the purpose? Okay. And purpose brings people together, and later set of people join because of people, right? The initial set of people join because of the purpose. And then people follow people. Oh, if X is in, I'm also going to be part of the journey. If Y is in, I'm going to go there. Whether it be a movie or a sport or, a career, or even a peaceful protest, I think people follow people. Now, together, you need to make progress, right? It's very, very important, because if you don't make progress, purpose gets diluted and people don't stick together. And unless you make progress, you can't pay, right? And purpose and people alone cannot keep teams together, because eventually you have to pay. While I would not put pay as the 4th thing, but all these 4 Ps have to work in tandem. So only thing is a little a bit different, in terms of Atul's approach versus, my approach. And I'm not saying, my approach is right or Atul's approach is wrong or his approach is right. I think everyone has their own approach. I do believe that, it's very important to write the script and also then choose the actor and the actress. Because sometimes, what ends up happening is if you change the script too much to suit the actor, actress, you may end up in nowhere, right? So there's a happy medium that you need to strike, in terms of, but people are absolutely very, very, very important. I think it's also equally important that you have your script and then you bring in the right people. Don't compromise still. You need to bring in great people. Of course, there'll be many pivots along the journey, right? Because simulating a war is way, way different than fighting a warfare, So very clearly, I think in that journey you learn and you need to have your antennas up.
Fantastic, and thank you for both of you bringing out this people aspect and also this wonderful chance meeting that has helped you and Dr. Ramesh jointly kind of go on to create this wonderful India partner story that you have. Atul, coming to you, I think, another fascinating thing that, I have kind of learned talking to you is that your journey really started very, very early. And as I understand, it started when you were 9 years old, when you were kind of exposed to the commercial world for the first time. So I'd like the audience to know that side of Atul, that, while he built a 2 billion market cap company, but he started the work much, much, much earlier, at the age of 9. So you want to talk to us a little bit about, that incident and how it influenced you in building these fantastic companies and brands later on.
In my childhood, I used to go with my mother to my Nana, mother's father's house in Vapi, and they owned a lot of farmland. So, around 9 years of age, and one day he called me and said, "Here are the chikus. I'm sending someone with you with 2 full boxes. You have to go sit outside the Vapi station where the hawkers sit as a market and sell these chikus. And so many dozens are there. This much amount you should bring. You can sell at what price you want. It left to you." So I had to calculate, and each unit, 4 chikus made one smaller basket, and that's what I had to sell. So I sat there, sold for the first time in my life, sold anything, and he sent me a few times more. But that was a very valuable experience because it taught me selling, I was like, it didn't matter whether hawkers or me, we are all business people. We are all selling. So that was a very valuable lesson in humility, in salesmanship, in business, in calculating profit, and the empowerment he gave me in decide the way you want. And that I learned that's the empowerment I need to give to my managers later on. That's what I learned, that people need to be given freedom and empowerment to then perform. Later on, we had a family shop. My father was a practicing doctor, now of course retired, but that time working partner was running it. So I used to go and sit at the shop during Diwali days. When all my friends were holidaying, I used to sit at the shop and help them because of the rush in the shop. And that again helped me learn about business. And later on, I think all these lessons into having seen business, though small level, the size is small or large, business is business. It's entrepreneurship. And that helped me, I think the early lessons that I learned helped me through my career.
Fantastic, and for someone who started at the age of 9, I'm sure your parents and your family is extremely proud of, where you've learned those lessons and where you've used those lessons, so thank you. Satish, coming to you, you briefly mentioned earlier about your table tennis and, how you were playing that and pursuing that. And at some point of time, there was also a thinking around the fact that should you pursue sports a little more and look at those railways and the other LIC jobs. And you haven't left sports in that sense. You still continue to play a very active role with the Pulela Gopichand Academy and, advising them and, working with them. So in your view, where is the intersection of sports and entrepreneurship? Because you've been at both sides of the table. So how do you see that?
Yeah, no, I think I'm just a volunteer, helping Gopi fulfill his dream. I think I remember one of the days, I think late 2006 or 7, Gopi said, look, I want to create a platform to produce many Olympians, right, from India. I said, that's a great cause and let's go work together. I'll obviously pitch in wherever I can, but it's really, I think, Gopi's passion, energy, skill, everything, right? Rest all volunteers. I would give the entire credit to Gopi, his mother, father, and of course, all other volunteers, right, who helped Gopi build this. I think there's a lot to learn from sport. In fact, last year, we did our annual entrepreneur meet, annual CEO meet. We do that for our portfolio companies. I had Abhinav Bindra and Gopi talk about the parallels between sport and entrepreneurship. In sport, you need to take risk, right, at the right time. And so, you need to do the same thing in entrepreneurship. In sport, you need to make very quick decisions, and you need to do the same, in entrepreneurship. in sport, it's a team game. I think Atul talked enough about, the role the team plays. And then you need to obviously in sport, from a defeat or from jaws of defeat, obviously reignite yourself, right? To be able to go and, win from kind of jaws of those defeat. Same thing for entrepreneur, right? I mean, a lot of us could go out there and talk about all the good things and say, oh, I built a successful company, and, it's a marathon. And there are many good days and many, many more bad days. If you don't remind yourself that you're running a marathon, you will give up. But you also have to wake up and run that sprint every morning, right? And that's not an easy exercise. So I think sport has these wonderful parallels, with entrepreneurship. And I believe that obviously it teaches you a lot, just personally, not just because I played sport, at a professional level. I really love sport. I mean, you listen to Virat Kohli, right? And you look at all these, spectacular performers, whether it's A.R. Rahman or Virat Kohli or Sachin Tendulkar or Michael Jordan, Sergey Bubka, anyone, Roger Federer, Djokovic. I think they commit 100%. They are in the moment. Their body, mind, soul is together at that moment. And that's the reason why they get to 110%. All of us know how to operate at 100%. A sportsperson or a creative artist, a dancer, they all go to 105%. And how do they get into that zone of super performers is just because their body, mind, soul is kind of together.
Aligned, yeah. So there's so many lessons to learn from the sports, and thank you for bringing that out, Satish, and also continuing to do wonderful work, as you rightly called, volunteering with Gopichand Pulela. Atul, coming to you, you've also played a role in a lot of these industry associations, in addition to running successful enterprises, whether it was Aptech or Hexaware, you also were very instrumental with NASSCOM, with FICCI, with CII, with a lot of these industry associations, and you've played a significant role there. What advice would you have for the budding entrepreneurs? Because a lot of times people have this thought in their mind that should I focus on my business, or should I also participate in these industry bodies, industry associations? So what would your advice to young entrepreneurs be?
Soon after setting up Hexaware, I joined NASSCOM. And since then, I've been active at NASSCOM till today. And I was chairman of NASSCOM in year 2000. It's clearly one of the best industry associations globally. I would advise anyone who's in the business of technology must join NASSCOM. There is so much to learn. At the same time, any startup which is using digital technologies, any new age startup, what I mean is, must join TiE. Again, there is so much to gain by joining and attending events, different TiEcons of your chapter, of others' chapters, the knowledge you get from the speakers, the mentors, the investors' presence, the guidance they give, the pitch you can make, and the interaction you can have with the investors and learn so much. I think it's an ongoing basis, something to gain by being with other entrepreneurs, being with investors, and being with people at large. So I think I would specifically for startups pick up these two organizations. For tech companies, SaaS companies and like that must join NASSCOM, and you're a startup, join TiE as well. I have gained a lot. And even today, I continue to remain active in both NASSCOM and TiE. If I did not see ongoing value, I would not be active, no? And we have, but even then, I sometimes wonder some of the successful startups after reaching certain level, not adequately active at TiE. I think they're making mistake in my view. I think they have a lot to gain by remaining active in it and continuing to not only learn, but also to impart knowledge that they have gained.
Fantastic, fantastic. I think that's a message for all of us, who are wanting to have that answer to that question, that what role do these industry bodies do. And from my own experience, I think it is fantastic because one, you can contribute, but a lot more you can learn, because the peer learning and the best case, case learning, which you learn from your fellow entrepreneurs is a fantastic piece that we can kind of get there. Satish, any additions you may have for this whole ecosystem building piece, because you've been doing some wonderful work, and now more so with reviving the entire TiE Andhra Pradesh chapter, and you've done that at many places in Hyderabad and now in Andhra Pradesh. So any additional thoughts you would have about ecosystems?
No, I think first thing we need to realize is that, of course, there's limited amount of time and you can't accomplish everything you want to. I think that realization itself will obviously bring in that ease. Otherwise, you have that guilt of, oh my God, am I missing out something? So you need to focus and prioritize for sure. I think TiE, like Atul said, is a great platform. I mean, in terms of whether it is mentoring, networking, even funding now, all of that. And the good thing about TiE is that, you get access to people, right? And you get to learn so much from people, and you want to learn from them, what went right for them and what are the mistakes that they've committed. And it's one global platform. So I believe that, for entrepreneurs who are busy building their companies, they can choose one or two other activities where they would be able to contribute and spend time, because, they would be very busy. With respect to TiE Andhra Pradesh, I think post the division of the state, of course, TiE Hyderabad has done so well, last 10 years or 15 years, amazing things in terms of the momentum, the type of programs, members, activities. And then, if you look at Vizag or Vijayawada or Tirupati, there are few entrepreneurs, and then there are a few young people, who are graduating, who are starting up. So they need some continuity, they need some direction. So I think connecting, those set of aspirants, with Hyderabad and then kind of bringing them onto the global platform was one of the key ideas for starting TiE Andhra Pradesh kind of chapter. Definitely we need to ramp that up and leverage help of TiE Hyderabad so that a healthy ecosystems take time. They don't happen overnight. I mean, they take, 10 to 15 to 20 years. I think we have the talent pool in the country. I think access to capital is improving. It was not great, 10 years ago, but it is improving very much right now. Capital is a commodity. I think capital chases good entrepreneurs. It's not the other way around. I think policy, you could not ask for anything better. I think government is staying away and in fact encouraging a lot of startups. I think markets are evolving, and events like COVID have created huge opportunities, right? So today, digital learning, digital health, digital entertainment, all of these, I mean, distributed workforce, SaaS adoption, e-commerce of essential goods. I think all these they've grown in the last 6 months, and it would have taken them 5 to 10 years to grow at the same pace if COVID weren't happening or didn't happen, right? So clearly, I think you've got all the essential ingredients. Now it requires great entrepreneurs to build good companies and create case studies for others to follow. Well, I strongly believe, I mean, if you really take another analogy in sport, take the number of chess world champions that India has produced, right? And look at, even from Gopi's Academy or in cricket, 83, what 83 has done for the country. When you see a Saina, Sindhu says, oh, this is how you get to top ranking spot in the world, or maybe I can do this better, right? If you look at Srikanth, some more people could emulate or can do it better. So I think if entrepreneurs see other entrepreneurs doing this, within their neighborhood, they learn. they improvise and maybe they can do it better. So that's what this ecosystem needs.
It helps push the whole piece together, you know, raises the bar and raises the level for everyone. So thank you. Atul, bringing out another different facet or aspect of you, you know, so while you were building all of these successful businesses on a global basis to, you know, multi-billion-dollar values, you were also very active in the philanthropy space, you know, and it's not a lean achievement to be ranked as the top 50 philanthropists in Asia in 2019. You know, and you do some amazing work with the Apsara Foundation, with the underprivileged, and with, you know, with girl child education. So can you talk to us a little about what kind of motivates you to, and where do you find the time to be able to do both of these, you know?
I don't much like to talk on philanthropy as such. The Fortune magazine somehow did the research and collected data. I avoid talking about it. But what I would say is what I have achieved in life, I would be living in a fool's paradise if I think it was all my talent. It is the society, it is the country, it is the society, the talent pool of India in the IT field that enabled me to succeed in life. So I have got so much from the society, from our education system, from the hardworking, talented Indians, the youngsters, that I cannot do enough to give back to the society. So whatever I'm doing little is a very small contribution in comparison with what I have derived from the society. So I think it's not a question of my devoting time, but it's a satisfaction that I get for my conscience and for me to sleep better, that I have been given so much, and at least little bit I need to do in terms of giving back, not to the same people, but to the poor and needy, like the girls at Avasra. We do free education of girls, come from very poor families, and we bring them to a global standard. We train them to become global leaders. And same way, the hospital that you referred to the other day, the pediatric hospital, is India's largest pediatric hospital at Haji Ali in Mumbai, that many of us, not me, have contributed to building, where there was no such facility in Mumbai. So I think these are the things that give me satisfaction more than really what I do for others.
Fantastic. And, you know, again, the humility and the humbleness can be seen. You know, it's no, like I said, it's no lean achievement to be ranked as the top 50 philanthropists. So wonderful. Thank you from the world side for helping these girls and these children. Satish, to bring out another side of too, you know, so while you're pursuing all of these fantastic work professionally that you're doing, you know, in our conversation earlier, I learned from you about this whole very fascinating pursuit that you have in spirituality. And I love the way you described that as you went around on a global spiritual shopping trip. So I'd like you to talk to us a little about this whole spiritual side of things of Satish that many people may not easily know about.
No, I think Vivek, you know, it's very simple. I think, you know, it's just discovery of the self. Very, very important, right? I think, you know, we've got, like what Atul mentioned, our tradition and our culture is so rich. You know, we have yoga, you know, we have meditation. And this is actually, this whole philosophical attitude is in our genes, right? I mean, that kind of flows through our blood. It's very important because the stress levels today is just enormous. I mean, even just take today, right? I mean, you know, we are in the midst of a pandemic. There's so much of job loss everywhere. There's issue of, you know, racial intolerance and also climate changes, right? So how do you keep yourself sane, when so much is happening around you. And the only way to do it is, of course, by being grounded. And how do you get grounded? Obviously, you need to discover self, and you need to see how do you de-stress. I think there are a lot of emotions that we all hold, very close, and then we become victims of those emotions. So you need to choose outlets, and different people have different ways of doing it. I think till 30, I used to very strongly believe that, if you just eat healthy, work out, and, nothing is going to happen to you. But I realized that your mind plays a very, very, very important role, and you need to cleanse your mind, and you need to reboot your mind, right? So you do a hard reset. All of us know when something is not functioning, we hit the power off button and then we power it on, and that resets the whole thing. But how do you reset your brain? So I think there are lots of wonderful techniques out there, which are not expensive. And nobody can teach you these things. I think one has to experience and walk the path and say, okay, this is what I learned from this, and this is what I derive from this, and this is what I enjoy. And it has benefited me a lot. I think all of them teach the same thing. That's what I was sharing with you, whether it is Art of Living, or whether it is Isha Foundation or Eckhart, all of them teach you the same thing. I think, you need to see what you like and how you discover yourself. That's very, very important, I believe.
Thank you. And I think, with that, I'd like to kind of bring the conversation to an end with, both of you also talking about a different facet that makes the human being complete, and how you have done it so wonderfully. And we could carry on in this conversation for the next few hours, but unfortunately, we do have a time restriction. So thank you very much to both of you, Atul and Satish. And it's been wonderful having this conversation with both of you. And I'll, at this stage, kind of hand it back to you, Funny, for us to kind of move towards the closure.
So Vivek, really appreciate you are an outstanding moderator, and Satish, you are a wonderful co-panelist, and I thoroughly enjoyed being with all of you. And thanks, Manohar. I just drop off because I have to join another event. So I'll thank everyone and all the participants who joined to listen to our crazy stories. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Atul. Thank you very much, Atul. Thank you.
Thanks, Atul.
Bye. Bye.
Manohar, over to you, sir. You can close and thank.
Yeah. So thank you very much, all the participants, for taking time and joining us. We almost had about 80 participants in the seminar. And thank you so much, Vivek, again, for taking this President Talk series and making it a great learning experience for all of us. In fact, I have been listening through the session, and the insights that are shared by both Atul and Satish have been, very, very, I would say, inspiring. Especially Atul being so humble, having reached such heights in the business, as well as, in terms of doing the giving back to the society, and your, whatever I would say, different dimensions beyond the entrepreneurship and investing. So definitely a lot to learn from. And thank you so much. And really appreciate all of you to having committed to the TiE cause of fostering entrepreneurship, sharing your experience, and giving back to the ecosystem. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the TiE Secretariat, Funny and Vamshi, and all the rest of the people, Mansi, Pragnya, and of course, Sandeep and Bhargav. I appreciate everybody, and thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vivek ji and Mr. Satish.
Good. Thank you.
And, good night.
Thank
have
you.
a great weekend. Thank you so much for the day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy the weekend. Thank you, and good night.